Anyway, here we are. So yeah, each of you, I'll go on the order on the screen here and just say hello. And if you have anything about what you're doing in the compost world that you want to share with us. So Dawn or Renata from Chick-fil-A.
Hi, well, I'll start, and if Renata wants to chime in with anything, please feel free. So Dawn Rhodes with Chick-fil-A. I am on our CSR team, focused on food waste reduction and diversion. So compost-wise, we recently refreshed our waste audits, and we are about 44% of our waste stream right now is organics, back of house organics. So we are doubling down on reaching out to operators and operator education around the back of house process that we have. We are a franchise model, or operator agreement, but it's essentially a franchise, and so we don't manage the waste contracts. So it's a partnership that I have to try to work with operators to divert back of house food waste. But we have a growing number, and it's exciting. We're actually starting a good number of our restaurants out in St. Louis are starting on December 1st. So always excited when more want to start.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Carolina or Matt or Elisa, I don't know who wants to speak for Cliff Bar.
Go ahead and chime in, and I'm sure Matthew and Elisa can add, but I'm the Senior Manager of Environmental Responsibility at Cliff Bar, and we're relatively new to the USCC Corporate Compost Leadership Council, and excited to be a part of this group. We actually don't generate as much compost waste. We actually send a lot of our any food waste that we can to animal feed. But as far as composting, we're very interested in supporting infrastructure and awareness around composting in connection to our work developing a compostable wrapper. So that is part of a broader sustainable packaging commitment that we've made at Cliff Bar. And one of the ways that we're tackling it is developing this compostable wrapper. And Elisa and Matthew, if you want to add anything to that.
I'm Elisa Hammond, and I don't have anything else to add, but I work on also what does it mean to be a regenerative company? And we know that the end of the life cycle is critically important to that vision. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't think that I see Jackie from Clorox. Is anyone else from the Clorox company here today? Okay, how about Christine from Dart?
Hello, Christine Cassidy, Dart Container. I'm the recycling and sustainability manager. And what we're doing for compost, COVID kind of slowed us down, but we're going to be starting a compost program at our corporate office in the cafeteria once it reopens. And then we partnered with a local composter. We already are sending our material there, but they're going to expand our program. And we committed to buying back all of the material that we send to them. So once they compost it, we will buy it back and use the compost on our corporate grounds. And then we're hoping to expand that to other locations as well.
Love that idea. Excellent. I don't see Lisa from Dominion, or is anyone else from Dominion here today? Okay. David, a new member of the Corporate Composting Council, David Friedland. Hello.
Thank you. Yes, great to be with this group. Longtime USCC member too at Eco Products, so appreciate it. Let's see what to share. Proud to announce that we just got green screen certification for our Vanguard molded fiber PFAS-free line. Basically a deep dive into the chemistry of that line. So took a lot of work, and really proud about that change. And certainly important in talking with our composting partners, right, to make sure that we are taking care of the materials that we send to their piles. Also, right now, it's the time of the year where we kind of reflect on 2021 and say, how many zero waste operators were we able to convert to front of house composting, and write some case studies. It's one of the things that I do in my role. So just getting the information in and looking out across the country at all the awesome success stories that our team has helped to create. So just, I think it reminds me that, and we try to say this often, right, of it's not just on the coasts where people are composting. It's not just San Francisco, right? It's not just Vermont. It's everywhere now. And yes, we still have work to do to increase infrastructure, but Birmingham, right? There's a site coming on in Birmingham, Alabama, right?
Hey.
Who knew? So
Right.
thanks so much, everybody.
Good point. Thanks for that. Good news. And I just realized I don't think Solange is here. I skipped, my thing was covering up Club Coffee. Solange, are you here? I don't think so. Okay, Peg from Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin. So what Georgia Pacific is doing is working with the Food Packaging Institute to try to help build access and infrastructure for our materials on a very local. Since I'm at the Innovation Center, we're actually trying to see how we can reduce our waste in our facility. And one of those is trying to understand where our food waste, which we don't generate a huge amount in our cafe, but where that can go, if it can go to a local community garden compost site. So that's what we're up to.
Great, good work. Eric from Mars.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Eric Klingenberg with Mars Incorporated. I sit at the corporate level leading material science. Mars is, obviously committed to redesigning our packaging to be reusable, more recyclable, and compostable plays an important part in that. And so we've been, over the past couple of years, starting to advocate more for composting infrastructure and really taking a look at our portfolio globally. What package designs or what products make the most sense to go into compostable packaging and where, and then working now to really design that compostable packaging and fit within the composting infrastructure. So it's great to be here and be a sponsor, and like meeting everybody else.
Thanks, Eric. Shannon.
Sorry, it took me a while to get unmuted. So NatureWorks also got green screen certified at the same time as Eco Products, platinum level for 2 of our food service grades, serviceware grades that looks well beyond PFAS and thousands of other chemicals of concern, so that we can additionally provide assurance to those who receive feedstocks with materials or products made out of our material. We're also working with FPI and expanding infrastructure and working on food diversion projects. And we also are supportive of the Compost Act and doing what we can to continue to support those efforts through all of our associations, including USCC. And then, of course, anytime we have an opportunity and an event we're supporting, especially a large event, to see if we can increase the use of post packaging and to help divert food waste from those events and get those events that aren't really in that space to start participating more fully at that level. And I think Leah's on the line, so I don't know if Leah, if you want to add anything else to that.
I think you covered it well.
Great, thank you. I got an out of office message from Robert from Sabert. Anybody else here from Sabert? Well, that is our official Corporate Compost Leadership Council. And for those of you who are also on the line, we would be happy to tell you more about what is involved in being a member. So just let Frank or I know. I'll put our email in the chat in a bit. Or maybe Eric, you could do that if you wouldn't mind. Eric Hudeberg is also on the line if you want to give a wave. Eric, he is our marketing and membership manager, so he would probably also end up working with you and has worked with a lot of these companies getting set up as members and supporters. So we'd be happy to do a presentation. So also Wendell Simonson from BPI is here. Wendell, I don't know if you're on visual or not. I have my presentation up, but if you want to give away, Wendell's going to be doing part of our work today, what we're going to be talking about. But the Corporate Leadership Council was formed. We actually we'll be starting our 3rd year in January, which is exciting. And we were formed to work on infrastructure development and other things around what brand companies, events management facilities, a lot of folks that had contacted us about wanting more access to composting for their facilities or with concerns about developing compostable packaging or products. So that's one of the reasons we were formed, is to have a good feedback loop with everyone. And since Thanksgiving is coming, I wanted to thank everyone. And I know, Frank, we all want to thank you all for supporting so far the work that we've been doing. And you can see for the price tag that we have here, the things we remind you every meeting what we've accomplished. And Frank's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the projects that are underway. And then I'll wrap with one, and then we'll start on our official agenda. So Frank, you want to talk about a few of these?
Yeah. I guess if you could just go back one. So the model zoning template, this has been circulating around for the last couple of months, and let's just say it's going to be a well-vetted document. We hope to have that ready for our conference in January. I'll talk a little bit more about the model rules. The Target Organics hub site is up, but it's continuing to advance and putting more information. I think we're looking at putting sample RFPs for municipalities that are looking for compost private-public partnerships. The impact study was launched on Monday. All compost manufacturers, both our members and non-members, we pulled lists from different databases across the country, EPA's, our list, the state regulator list, and as well as the EERF, the Environment and Education Research Foundation. That's going to be a deeper dive into the impact, both the economic and the environmental impact of our industry in the U.S. So we're excited about it. That's going to take about a year to get done, but we finally got it kicked off, and we actually have some of that is we've done with SurveyMonkey, and it's giving some live feedback on certain questions. So it's kind of interesting to watch. Over the last couple of days, people are actually going in there and putting in information. You can see the charts going up. So that's pretty exciting. Next slide, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to, like Linda said, it is Thanksgiving. I wanted to thank all corporate members, because these projects have been on our radar for several years, and really by the funding that we're able to receive from the Corporate Compost Leadership Council has really helped us fast track some of these things and get them done. So the model rules template, now you saw it was about 75% done. It's actually probably closer to 85 right now. So this is basically a template for states to follow if they're looking to update or improve their regulations around source separating compost. If you really look at it, some states don't have hardly any. Some states have very rigorous rules, but there's all pieces in every state that are missing types of information, and so we want to try to do here is get people on the same page, get states to adopt rules that, first of all, make sense, they're science-based, and that this process is well vetted through compost operators, state regulators, and industry consultants and professionals. So back in 2012, we came out with this document. Of course, it's old now, so it needed to be updated. So we formed a group, if you go to the next slide, to start revising it. So the process, really in 2019, we sent surveys out to all 50 states, as well as some of the US territories, to collect data. It was a series of 5 different surveys, pretty in-depth surveys. 2020, we started reviewing that data. 2021, collectively aggregated it. We hired an intern from the Duke's Nicholas School of Environment, and she's working right now to kind of wrap things up. Over the past summer months, we've held stakeholders meetings to go through and vet some of the changes that were recommended based on the survey results that we got. And we're in the process of putting a final vetting stakeholder document together by next week, hopefully, or by the first week in December. We'll hold another meeting to vet that process, and the final product will be ready in late December. And we hope to have it ready for our conference in January. Next slide, Linda. So at the response rate that we got, there's 29 states and 1 US territory that participated in at least 1 or more surveys. And you can see the states there that have responded. And some states are actually, in the past, this rule back in 2012, between 2012 and now, we've had 27 states that actually adopted some portion of this model rule template. Next slide, Linda. So the areas that we're really looking at that have changed over the last 10 years, states have added exemption rules for smaller scale composting, for community composting. There's new definitions. The words community compost did not exist back when these were first put together. We're asking states to look more at standardizing annual reporting requirements. For obvious reasons, we need to know what the data is across the country from these facilities, like what they're taking in feedstock wise, are they accepting compostable products and those kind of things. So we're asking states to make annual reporting mandatory, but also to provide that information to the public, because some states actually collect it but do not report it. And some states actually collect it manually through paper forms and not electronically. So training and certification is another area to raise the standards of the industry. We want to recommend that there be at least 1 trained operator on site at all times for obvious reasons. And many of the solid waste rules in these states actually have language in their solid state rules around stuff like transfer stations and landfills, but not specifically for composting operations. And then product testing, we think that's important. We're seeing more and more issues around finished product, and we want to make sure that the industry is looking at producing quality compost, because if you produce quality compost, it basically flies out the door. So that's kind of our update. And again, we hope to have this out, and then we will circulate it out to all the states and get more feedback from the states as well. Any questions on this? All right, back to you, Linda.
All right, thanks, Frank. Okay, so that's what we have been working on and wrapping up. So we are looking forward now. And one of the projects that we have on our year 2 menu that a lot of you have seen, and I'll send out a link to that after the meeting to everyone in case you haven't seen it. But one of them is a national consumer engagement campaign. And we're going to just have a very brief presentation right now about what we're envisioning, and we really want your feedback. But one of the really important things here is that we are going to work with BPI on this in terms of how we roll it out, because we have compatible goals. And, we're all hearing about how important it is to work together and not duplicate. So that is what we are launching here. So, I'm sorry, that was supposed to support Frank's discussion about target organics. So you saw that. So what this campaign will do is provide a national visibility for composting at some level, which Wendell is going to get into more detail about. But what we're going to be talking about is what we need from you all, and it isn't just money. So with that, I am going to turn it over. Oh, wait, no. And the other thing that I forgot to tell you is, yes, the other reason why we really want to do this now, because we know there are other groups that are working on campaigns, and we're not sure when those are going to launch out. There are groups that some of you may be part of. But right now, there are over 500 bills that are in Congress, in legislatures about compost and compostable products. So there is tons of interest, tons of questions and need for this. So that is why we are moving forward with this now, in case you're wondering. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to Wendell.
Thanks, Linda. and thanks for having us talk about this. I know, at least some of the people on this call today have heard us talking about this within BPI, so this won't be new information for everybody. And I think I know most of the folks in general on the call, so nice to see everybody again. But yeah, just super quick overview. So this has been a project within BPI. It started as something that Rhodes and Renault were working on in the OSC2 group back in 2020 as an obvious piece of this overall marketing, messaging, consumer awareness, that sort of piece of this, right? It's like we've got on-product labeling, we've got regulatory stuff that's happening, right? It's like, where's this piece of direct to consumer, bigger picture education and awareness around composting and how compostable products fit into that? So of course, this isn't a new topic to anyone, but we've got so many issues sort of in the direct foreground, I'd say, that this is sort of lagged. And it's also, as we'll get into, right, like a really big dollar project from a distribution of a national campaign point of view. And we've got some challenging content. So, it's sort of lagged for some good reasons, I think. Anyway, work that was done within OSC2 came to a subcommittee of my committee at BPI, which is the communications committee. We started down the path of really coming up with a project brief. And again, it was like, we didn't have a funding mechanism identified, but the general idea was like, could we start the process of engaging some creative help? So marketing, branding, agency type help with like the beginnings of a campaign concept that we could use to go out and pitch to potential fundraising partners to help us like build out a fully developed campaign and then, try to get that funded for national distribution. And so we did that, and we got to the point with a project brief that really laid out the core elements, which would be the content considerations and then target audience pieces, which is what I'm going to talk about you all with here, and curious to hear people's ideas and thoughts. But until we have a path forward from a funding point of view, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to go too much further. I had heard Linda talking about this group's interest in a consumer campaign for a while now. And every time I heard that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I got to talk to Linda about that. And so we finally were able to connect those dots, and here we are talking about it today. So go ahead to the next one. Yeah. So this is a little bit from the brief that we pulled together in the BPI committee. And I'll just read this aloud here. In order to frame the issue, while most consumers are aware of traditional paper and plastic recycling, there is low awareness of composting as a companion process in the waste reduction effort. As residential and commercial access to composting expands, more consumers will have the ability to compost materials in and out of the home. Education is needed to inform that behavior. Additional education is needed on the environmental benefits of composting, how to tell if packaging is compostable, and how consumers can participate, right? So it's like the way I envision places like, David's example of Birmingham, adding composting infrastructure in that community. And it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? And so presumably there's direct communications that come from, whoever the entity is at the municipal level that's rolling out a program like that. So that exists, but then at a bigger picture level, how is messaging getting to the folks in the community like that about why this is important, why they might want to consider opting in if it's an opt-in program, all that kind of thing. All of that, best I can tell, is missing, from the public consciousness, So like Linda's examples earlier of Got Milk and Smokey the Bear, it's like, we need to start figuring out how to get to that point with composting. And this is my way of trying to frame up that issue. So go ahead to the next one. And so, of course, this is where it starts to get really tricky really fast, right? Because we've got a lot that we want to try to communicate. We've got, generally speaking, an audience that is, fairly uneducated on the topic, right? And there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to get across. And so these are the 4 core areas that we identified in our brief, and I'll go through them and stop and see what people think. But what is compost and composting at the highest level? What materials are compostable? So what can I put in my bin effectively? Why does composting and composting matter, right? And then how would I go about getting involved? So after long conversations with our committee, this is kind of where we landed as these 4 key tenets. And if you can picture, if we're talking about national distribution, got milk style ad campaign, this is a lot to try to get across in small chunks of information or small spaces from a content point of view. And that's, to me, given my marketing background and interest in the subject, that's going to be the hardest part of this, actually. We all know how difficult it can be to get these concepts across in much larger format vehicles, right? Like websites and sales presentations and live conferences like USCCs. And what we're talking about trying to do is distill a lot of that down into digestible sound bites, which is really going to be quite an effort, and for sure why I believe we need some professional help from some agencies. But I guess I'll stop there and see if there's questions, or it's worth kind of talking through. Might be helpful to keep that slide up, actually, Linda, so we can look at that list. But I'm sort of curious, people have any thoughts or comments on anything I've said so far?
Wendell, it's something we're definitely very interested in at Cliff Bar, and need to talk more with some different internal members of the team. But we've just recently completed a public opinion poll working with Morning Consult that does very top-notch polling, specifically looking at public opinion on composting and on compostable packaging. It's a fairly robust survey, and I actually am looking at doing a follow-up on it as well to dive deeper in a couple of different areas. I'd like to be able to at least offer some of that data to you, which we're not ready to make fully public, but I think we could make public to you, provide to you for the purposes of this campaign, to try to create more robust data about current perceptions or misperceptions as it might be. So let me do a little bit more rundown with key folks, but let's also connect maybe right after Thanksgiving, and I can at least give you a preview of what that data looks like, and you can let me know how interesting it might be for these efforts.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're going to be making that exact ask towards the end of this call, but that's exactly a huge missing piece in terms of what we've got right now, is that kind of data to guide this work.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, and this is why I invited you to bring along your marketing teams. If you do have opinions on this at this early juncture, it will help us form our next steps.
Hi, I'm Allie Forsman. I'm new to this committee. I was invited by Linda and by Frank to join into today's call. And I think, this has been, as a founder of a company called Recultivate, we've been working with farmers, we've been working with developers on brownfields, corporate campuses. I think one of the things I can offer is the psychological piece of it. Like everyone's aware of what composting is, so to speak, to their own degree. But the immediate connection is to problems, meaning the vectors. Right. So that's like an immediate reaction that we've seen across the board. I would say it's a 95% reaction, that they feel that there's some part of this that's going to cause a problem down the road. So I could see where like a friendly Smokey the Bear would work, like Only You, because it kind of talks about, that relationship between the solution and the problem, so they feel understood and heard. And it doesn't have to be, I don't think, complicated, but it just is something that I think comes up in every conversation, that it's become almost a paradigm shift, that compost presents problems, not compost presents solutions.
Good point, Allison. Maybe Rocky the Raccoon instead of Smokey the Bear.
Something something like that. But I think something people can identify with to break down that barrier of that immediate concern that there's going to be animals and smells and,
Right.
the things that all of these, large corporations, at least when I deal with them, are concerned that may cause problems with their neighbors, or, that it bleeds into all the different conversations.
And Wendell, this is Peg. Your key content messages is pretty high level. Are you going to go into like what the difference between that and recycling is? Because some people they just don't get it. Composting, recycling, the same thing. I don't want you to go into the weeds here because you gave us a really great high level, presentation. But that and the weird thing is people don't get that industrial composting is the same as home composting, just done differently in a way. I'm not trying to understate the differences, but because they hear all these things and they don't really get it. So that I don't, again, try not to get into the weeds, but is that kind of part of your key messages?
Yeah, both those things are, Peg, and it's a great example of like how far down can we go? Should we go? How would we go if we were going to go? The point is in the number 2. So what materials are compostable, right? It's one thing to say, oh, so your food scraps, your yard trimmings and, BPI certified compostable packaging can go in a bin, right? But then of course, once you get into the packaging, it invites all this whole other set of questions, right? Like you're bringing up, and the differences between recyclable. And then likewise on the, how do I get involved? That's where that whole like, okay, do I have access to a bin? What can go in that bin, right? And also like, do I have the opportunity to do it in some kind of backyard or, kitchen kind of way, right? And so that's where that would all fit. And so you can see, right, as soon as you start to ask the exact questions you're asking, Peg, about 1 through 4 here, the notion of a soundbite, Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent forest fire, right? I mean, it's like our content is really challenging, for small bite consumption is the whole.
It sounds like a series of continuation of bites, right? You're going to have, your different bites as you're going to build, and if you don't necessarily see them in the same right order, it's okay. Is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Peg, I would say, the source separation piece is always, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And I think the recycling industry has to be with us on this because they don't want food waste in their recycles, and we don't want plastic and glass in our compost. So I think it's a big part of it. And NRC did a really good thing on the food waste piece in the refrigerator. I don't know if you remember the strawberries that they buy, and that kind of an ad is an impact. Like, what do you do with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's in the number 3. So like,
right.
Why does it matter? And there's so
right.
much to say there, right? This whole notion of like, well, I might not be a lot I can do about my daily commute to work because I live in a place with crappy public transportation and yada yada. But like, if I can keep my food out of the trash, then I'm contributing, to this climate change mitigation effort, right? And it's like, and all of that, doesn't lend itself to quick sound bites, right? So like, really, none of 1 through 4 lend themselves to quick sound bites. And like, I'm saying that we have to do some combination of all of those things in order to get across core messaging, right? That I think is core here. So it's no small feat.
Matthew put in the chat some of the results that he got from the survey, and lack of industrial facilities, lack of infrastructure, which we're trying to help remove those hurdles by putting together deliverables like we just talked about, like zoning and model rules, and identifying what's out there with our survey. So trying to overcome those hurdles lack of knowledge is probably something that we all have to all come together on our message and what that message is. But there you go with the messy and gross, 14%, Allison.
Yeah, and a few folks that were on the call that Wendell had on this topic a month or so ago heard me say this, and I'll just say it again. Even though we don't want to get in the weeds about contamination at this point, it seems like, although I think we'll have to decide in our study what we're going to focus on in this first round. But we can learn from the recycling industry, which had to go out there and have recycle right campaigns because they didn't do it right from the get-go. And I think we have to think about what maybe lessons we can learn as we roll this out, and as we roll out labeling, which is going to get a lot of work and attention in the coming year. Roll that into this when the time is right.
So maybe Linda, one more slide.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so we've got a lot of complexity around the core messaging, what belongs in there, how do we do that? And then, right, also some decisions to make, I think maybe easier decisions to make, but still decisions to make around target audience and segmentation, right? And so, from a budget, the more we can scope something, distribution strategy, the less money that we need, it's still going to be a lot of money. But then it's, right, the content connects back to like, well, who are we talking to? And so Matt putting in like this 33% number, which is not surprising at all. It's higher than I would have thought it would be, right? But it's like, okay, in terms of like people who are going to resonate this, for us, it seemed like if you started in places where we at least know there's some level of commercial or residential access, right? Then if you recall that number 4 about the how do I get involved, if it's outside of just the backyard piece of the equation, right, it makes a lot of sense to target communities that like have programs that exist, right? And to support those programs, support new programs that are coming online. And so you get to your Seattle, Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Minneapolis Metro, and then, isolated spots within the Northeast and the Southeast. And so, the thought there being that A, you need to scope it somehow, and that B, right, if you target places where the infrastructure exists, then you've at least got a chance maybe at getting some folks' attention, and also could target that content, tailor that content specifically in terms of call to actions, right? Knowing that if a municipal program's in place in a city that you're running an ad, you can create a stronger call to action. But there's work and discussion that has to happen, right, on this aspect of it too, right? So it's this content audience thing. We've got the content piece, and then this piece will be where to roll it out and why.
Okay. And at this point, I think Eric, who is USCC's marketing manager, is going to take the rest, take the next couple.
Thanks, Linda and Wendell, for that kind of history and the background on it. Really useful. And Matt for sharing those statistics about the survey you did. That's really helpful. And really, that's a perfect leader into what we're looking for. Quite a bit, but a fun project, exciting project to be a part of. So any research like Matt shared about awareness, access to resources, any of that kind of information that could help guide us to scope, like Wendell said, would be really useful. And you can share that with me or Frank or Linda, or we could have a call about it, depending on how proprietary that information is. Would love to just learn from the industry research that you may have done. In addition to that, I see some marketing team members are here from your organizations, but I'd like to ask that if you have any team members you could lend to be a part of a subgroup of this committee to work to flesh this out and really try to dive into the subject and engage for a little over a year with myself and with Linda and Wendell on this subject. So if there's anyone who's who's got some time and marketing expertise to help guide this, that's very useful. So supporting this project as a potential ad council pitch could be something that we could do in the future. So that would also be useful, but really helping us scope and create messaging to guide this project, however it may kind of unfold. And then the final piece is the financials. So Linda, if you want to go to the next slide. So really the pitch for this is to contract an ad agency to help us do this work. So Wendell, Linda, myself, we all have marketing experience, but a national campaign or a regional campaign like this is an undertaking. So we're working to contract an ad agency, and the kind of running number for this would be between $15,000 and $25,000 to create the first round of ad material. So whatever that may be, got Compost, I love it, but something else, something that can get the point across, but also lead into the complexity that we discussed. So we're looking for financial support for this campaign and looking to start this process in the next couple of weeks, or excuse me, the next couple of months. So with that, I want to go into unless there are any questions or comments. That's okay. Linda, if you wouldn't mind, go to the next slide. So I outlined a couple of different scenarios, two different scenarios. The first, and we've got most of the people for option A listed in this call, but this would be a campaign that we create, that we are in control of the messaging, and we would be able to roll this out potentially next year. So it'd be in collaboration with the council, the Compost Research and Education Foundation, hopefully BPI, and members of this group. So this would be the timeline for option A would be trying to create that RFP, secure funding for that RFP, and then develop the content in whatever form we choose, and scope that we choose. The pros to this on my end is we're the content experts between BPI and the council and the foundation. We know Compost, and we know compost manufacturers. So these campaigns can be expensive. Potential downside to doing it ourselves may be a lack of reach in terms of in dollars on the full campaign. So no guarantee of that. But the second option could be working with another partner. So there are other organizations out there who are seeking to do this type of content creation and dissemination. So there are some potentials out there in very rough form, and we could work with an outside group to disseminate this kind of content, and that could happen. And a pro would be more dollars, larger funding, but less control, one less hand on the wheel, so to speak. So with that, yes. So there are a couple of organizations that have done that. Hey, Frank, you think you could step in and chat a little bit about other organizations that are trying to do this type of national campaign?
Yeah, sure. And the other point to make is, and I think Wendell touched on this, areas where we know there's good infrastructure and targeting those areas. I mean, we know some just off the top of our heads, but by this time next year, we'll have some really good data from the industry economic study that we're doing. So we could even drill down a little bit further on that. But regards to national campaigns and collaborators, I mean, you know, obviously BPI and this group and our foundation, you know, are all in together as partners on it. But there's some other national groups out there that we could pull in, sustainable packaging, FPI. I mean, some of the other larger organizations that, you know, even National Recycling. I mean, I think there's opportunity here. Keep America Beautiful. Other both grassroots and also other areas where we can probably get more funding from. And obviously that would help. The greater the funding, we could fast track it. But I think option A gives us more control, obviously, on what the content should be, and option B, where obviously we still have some control, but we probably give up some of that control, but the speed of you know, maybe quicker and more condensed timeline, as it says there. I think that's kind of the way we can go. But I think getting the first part done, you know, that first $25,000 will help us determine, you know, in the meantime, we can look at other collaborators that could possibly contribute more. Because when we get into the campaign stuff, it's going to be a lot more expensive, I think. And it would be great to have that, and you know, that kind of funding behind us. And I don't know if there's any other funding mechanisms that you may know of that we could also tap into.
So David's asking about closed loop. So that's the other one that we know. For folks that didn't see that announcement, was launched this week, and they're in this process of identifying potential projects for that funding. And so we won't know until around February, is my understanding of what those projects are going to be. There's a chance that one of them could be some kind of consumer awareness effort that involves a campaign like we're talking about here. And so BPI is a part of that group in an advisory role. And so part of the idea with this project, and also some other things we're working on at BPI, is to make as much progress as we can to be in a position to help influence projects that flow through that consortium as we possibly can. And so that there's a little bit of a chicken egg thing across all of those projects because of the unknown what they're going to decide to work on. But I think there's a good chance, given the consumer brand stakeholders that have paid into that fund. You know, I'm hoping that both labeling and consumer awareness are going to be projects that get identified in that closed loop project, and they would be a potential collaborator for sure.
So we would love to hear others of you chime in on this idea and what you're thinking, or any questions you have.
This is Eric. Hey, Wendell. We talk a lot on the U.S. Plastics Pack. I think this is a great idea, but I really think, like, the fact that you're focusing on regions, and so see where it goes. I mean, we're part of the closed loop stuff too, but I think it's an important idea to get it out there and get that common message. And I don't know compost, but at some point, what's biodegradable, right? All these things, what it's not. Right, as we get into this too, will help any type of educational things, but supportive in general. I think we just have to figure out how to go forward, right? Maximize the output of that money rather than do it twice in one. How do you collaborate to get it really done once right?
David Friedland, were you getting ready to say something?
Oh, I don't know. I was trying to decide if I should say something or not. I'll just be very honest with you. I guess I don't know if this is our biggest issue, and just awareness. It's important, right? But I mean, Will this really fundamentally change the structural kind of challenges that we have with increasing access around the country? Like, is the fact that people don't know enough about compost the reason why we don't see more municipalities building facilities or more yard waste facilities accepting food waste? I'm open to being wrong on this. It's just a question that comes to my mind.
I think,
question.
sorry, Brenda.
Go ahead.
I think you have a good challenge question. From my point of view, education of the, I'll say, consumer is very important. You hear MRFs trying to educate me as a consumer, me as a resident, of what is supposed to go in the blue bin, and it's continual. So I think from a compost point of view, in the compostable products that go into that, we need to do the same, and you can't ignore it at a high level. That's my point of view.
Dave, the way I think about it, it's like a pull-through strategy, right? And so this whole idea of like, okay, if people knew, what would that change? If people knew this whole issue of food in landfill, they hear all of this stuff about plastic in landfill, but if they really knew the problem was the food in landfill, and that the mechanism for addressing that is through composting, and that compostable packaging fits into that, would that change anything for us in terms of our ability to leverage the spots that we need to leverage to grow the infrastructures? I agree with you. This isn't going to happen. It's not going to like fundamentally shift, right, some of these existential barriers that are in our way, but it could help generate support for what eventually need to be programs. So it's a good.
I would just echo that. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles for increased access and infrastructure, right? So, and we've identified those hurdles with the U.S. Composting Council, and that's kind of the projects that we just went over earlier are major hurdles. You can't solve them all at once, but to me, we don't start the education process now, and I'm talking like grade school education all the way up through college and consumer, the awareness factor of the impact of putting food waste in landfills and not being able to capture that resource and put it back into our soils and talk about regenerative agriculture. That's all changing. So if we don't stay ahead of the curve, so yeah, it's not going to like automatically get us more facilities. It would be great. The Compost Act may have a bigger effect of getting us facilities quicker because that's real dollars. But again, that's over 10 years too. So, but I think you got to start somewhere, and it's a slow process and awareness. And so I'm going to get off my soapbox. I'll let everybody else talk. Thanks.
This is Eric. I mean, I think the same thing, right? So that's why I like the regional approach. So I don't think it's so big, but if we can, maybe eliminate some contamination, help composters, demonstrate better economic viability, and that through the education in those regions, I think we can continue to expand on that. And to me, that would help others in the expansion of the infrastructure. I couldn't agree more that expansion of infrastructure and getting out there is probably our biggest challenge. But if we can start to show these consistent messages, improvements at the different regions, we can continue to build off of that. So that's part of, I think, how much will it cost? How do we go in? How do we sort of do it right and manage it with a proportionate idea for what we want to see as a response?
It's really great. Thank you, Eric. I want to echo what Linda put in the chat. So really, from my end, I'd love to see people who want to be involved in helping this conversation. So we want to have a steering committee. And if you would like to be a part of that, I would love to chat with you about what that could look like, what your time constraints are, but would really want to get together regularly with a small group of people, marketing minded people, strategy people, to hammer out these kinds of things and then be able to bring that back to the larger group if we're considering this. So you've got my email in the chat. I'll put it there again, and Linda's and Frank's as well. So if you or anyone in your team is interested, please reach out. We would love to have you for sure.
Yeah, we always send out a recording and some notes, so we will definitely pummel you with information today or tomorrow after this call. So please respond back if you, and the PowerPoint as well. If it stirs something with you, and if you're not on the council yet and you want to participate on the steering committee, we also would love to meet with you and talk about the CCLC. We do consider in-kind contribution as well. So we're definitely open to talking with you. So I know we're almost at the hour. Does anyone else have anything they want to add or? All right, well, so I didn't get to, I had one more slide and it's about our conference, and I won't share screen again with 1 minute left, but I will tell you compostconference.com is our conference in January, which we are holding in person in Austin, Texas. And we would love to see you all there. It's a great way to talk to composters, get to know what their issues are, listen to the sessions, walk around the exhibit hall and learn eavesdrop on their conversations, what they're concerned about. I know that's why a lot of you come to these calls and have joined the CCLC, is just to understand our point of view. So that's a great place to learn. So we welcome you all. And those of you who are in the CCLC, we'll be sending you an email about discounted passes. And Frank, do you have any last word for us, or? He's on mute, so I guess not.
Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Hopefully you don't create too much food waste. If you do, donate it or compost it.
Well said.
Good.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.